Good evening, and welcome to our March installment of the Spotlight series. I'm Ricky Ramon, and I'm currently on faculty at Howard University's Department of Theater Arts. I'm currently in Austin, Texas, and would like to recognize that I am on stolen land, and would like to honor the ancestors of the Humanos, Sana, Tonkawa, and Comanche peoples. Wooley's relationship with Howard University has existed for several years. This core partnership is very important to Woolly Mammoth and Howard alike. Getting to produce events such as this and having Woolly Mammoth serve as an extension of Howard's campus has been a great joy. Tonight's Spotlight segment is on Reset. Reset is a digital collection of historical resources, excerpts, and video performances curated by HU's very own Nicole M. Brewer, Phaedra Shatar Carpenter, Jordan Ely, Kristen Jackson, Woolly's own Kristen Jackson, Letitia Ridley, and HU's alum superstar Nicole Salter. These curators, 6 Black cisgendered women, theater artists, activists, and scholars, were invited to identify people and work that has deeply impacted them, but has historically been overlooked by the Western canon. I want to introduce you to tonight's moderator, Woolly Mammoth's Director of Connectivity, Kristen Jackson. She's been the Connectivity Director at Woolly Mammoth Theater Company since 2014, where she identifies the civic questions at the heart of productions and creates opportunities for meaningful dialogue and understanding through creative programming and community partnerships. In 2016, Jackson was selected to participate in TCG's inaugural Rising Leaders of Color program, and she's also a member of the 2016 Art Equity cohort. She has worked on and off Broadway for O-Star Productions and Playwrights Horizon in the areas of producing and casting, and as a teaching artist and performer for the regional theaters Cincinnati Playhouse in the Park, Actors Theater of Louisville. Kristen earned a BA in Theater Studies and English from Duke University and an MA in Performance as Public Practice from the University of Texas at Austin. Go Horns. Take it away, Kristen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am just thrilled to be able to be here representing Woolly Mammoth and our incredible core partnership with Howard, and also wearing as well my hat as one of the curators of the Reset Project. Uh, just to give you a little bit of a lay of the land, what we're going to do today is we have with us, even though the project was much larger than those of us who are present, we have two members of the curation team, myself included. The other person joining me from the curatorial team is the magnificent actor, director, and educator, Nicole Brewer. She is a leading voice in the national conversation around anti-racist theater. She's currently a full-time faculty member at the Yale School of Drama. And as you already heard, she is a very proud Howard alum. Also joining me today are going to be two of the incredible performers featured in the collection. We have with us Helen Hayes Award-winning actors and Woolly Company members, Dawn Ursula and Shannon Dorsey. Uh, you have, I am sure, seen them across stages all across our city and region. They are two of the most incredible and talented performers I've ever had the pleasure of being in the presence of. And their work and talent is only matched by their incredible spirits and the rigor that they bring to all of the work that they do. Now, I hope all of you were able to visit Reset in advance of today. That can be done at www.woollyreset.net. Reset will be available through March 31st. But in case you haven't made it to Woolly Reset yet, we are going to be doing a little bit of a watch party throughout the conversation. So you'll get an opportunity to check out some excerpts from pieces that our guests were most intimately connected with. So with that being said, first up, I would love to welcome the incredible Nicole Brewer. Nicole, are you out there?
I'm here, friend. Hello.
Hi. This is so wonderful. I love the fact that I get to ask you questions because it also probably means I'm gonna learn things about you that are things I thought I knew and didn't even know before. Because you're just so multifaceted and such an incredible person.
I'll take it. Yes.
Would you mind starting us off, telling us a little bit about what the role of curator meant for this project in particular?
hmm Well, thank you so much for the invitation to be present with you all tonight. Yes, I feel like I must like rep some Howard gear, so I'm putting this here. Otherwise, they may be trying to pull my degree. HU all day, every day. But yeah, I don't know. I think for me, it's like going back to the definition of the word, right? And so I think about one of the definitions of curator is someone who has been given agency or authority to make selections and to put things together. And so, what it has meant is for me to really think about the various pathways of my journey in the theater industrial complex and what I have seen that felt like it looked like me or mirrored my circumstance and what I haven't seen. And so therefore I had to spend some time dreaming into being how I could fit within the industry. And so when we were like asked, right, this really large question as we were coming together around reimagining the most prevalent stories and tells and whose histories those were and whose life did that like prop up as legitimate. and desirable and, all the things.
Mm.
I just had to come back to myself, right? And go, what did I want to have? What did I want to see? And so that's where I went. That was kind of, I feel like all of us were, mining ourselves in some way, shape, or form to bring forth what we ended up with.
Yeah, just to build off of that, I know that some of the pieces that I ended up selecting were pieces that I very much felt like, oh, I wish I had discovered this material like 10 to 15, 20 years earlier. Like,
Uh-huh.
I wonder how that would have shaped who I am. And yet also I have to be grateful, right, for the fact that the material did become part of my journey and my self-education and my growth. Um, yeah. So the in terms of that like personal connection to this act of curation,
Mhm.
how did you find that our individual identities and stories influence the content of Reset?
Oof. I think that's really interesting, right? Because now I'm going to speak more largely about just being Black women.
Mm.
And I think in those initial early conversations, we were casting that net we was so wide in order to like grasp all of our community as we possibly could. And as we were with that, and as we learned what our own edges were, as we were accountable to that kind of vastness, and then who gets harmed in that, but also like, how do we do that justice? We ended up coming back to us, I think, is the way that we kind of righted that situation. And it was hard. And so for now, I'm going for the big, but I'll speak from the I. It is really hard for me as someone who has been racialized in this country, when given an opportunity like this, which I hope becomes the norm. And I'm not just talking about William, I'm talking about in the industry, like sharing power in this way and program and resources and the invitation, that I won't feel that it's so necessary to kind of like,
Yes.
you know, but that's what it was. That's what it was. And I think each of us made that commitment to bring personally what was resonating with us in our own lives to the conversation. And we didn't replicate anything. Like we all brought different yet connected work to this project. So grateful for that.
I am totally hearing what you are saying. It is reminding me of a conversation that we had about yeah, how do you balance that desire to, in this moment, figure out how do I make sure, one of the things we said a lot was, how do we make sure these folks get the flowers that we want to make sure that they get and are able to enjoy them while they're still here and with us. And that kind of feeling of almost like responsibility of like, we have this opportunity, we've got to do it all. But also, how do you balance that with the fact that we're also human and we're living through a pandemic. We're figuring out, what our field looks like too, when we can't, necessarily be on the stage in the same way. So thinking about how that influenced the process is also really interesting, a really important question. Well, Nicole, I would love to get to sharing a little bit of the material that you brought forth and put center stage for the Reset project. Is there anything that you want to say in advance of the material that we're going to check out?
Yeah, I do. Thank you for that. I think for me, Hattie McDaniel is like why her particular story was resonant to me is a couple of things. First, she's a dark-skinned Black woman, talented Black woman, but she was also a larger Black woman. And that has been, it was, and it continues to be like the combination of those things, woman, dark skin, and thicker, that has constantly been present in my work within the industry, and not trying to, like, you know, figure out how do I stay here? How do I do this work? How do I be seen in the fullness of myself? And so I think about Hattie McDaniel as someone who was desexualized. I think about her as someone who was right on that cusp of her particular generation's issues with race, and the ways in which she, I'm just doing the gesture because it's like, this is Hattie McDaniel, and the way she just got pushed to the side because of the roles that she was doing. And it was like an all or nothing kind of cancellation that happened there, even though she understood these roles, yes, can be, and I'm in these roles doing what I can in terms of talking to power and making changes and shifts and adjustments, which is something that actors do all the time, right? But that legacy wasn't being shared. And so I just deeply appreciate the grace, her humor, and her the strength of her voice, was not apologizing for who she was in this essay that she wrote, right? So that's the T on what Hattie meant to me.
That's amazing. The other piece, so we will have excerpts from Hattie from the essay "I Have Never Apologized," which Hattie McDaniel wrote, which is being performed by Saida Erica Ekulona. Immediately prior to that, you will also see an excerpt from the excerpt of a Black feminist statement by the Cohambie River Collective, performed by Amaya McGinty, Cece Reed, and Patience Sings. That was one of the pieces that I curated. And I think the reason, just to let you into my brain for a second, part of why that felt so important to me to include was I remember the first time I read those words, my brain, it was like fireworks went off, you know? And it was something that I just so deeply needed in that moment, to, you know, hear the words, hear that my life and my experience as a Black woman was precious just cause. Just cause. Do I need to give you a justification? No. Just because. So with that, my good friend Allison over there, stage managing us, can you please take us to the videos?
We are a collective of Black feminists who have been meeting together since 1974. The most general statement of our politics at the present time would be that we are actively committed to struggling against racial, sexual, heterosexual, and class oppression, and see as our particular task the development of integrated analysis and practice based upon the fact that the major systems of oppression are interlocking. The synthesis of these oppressions creates the conditions of our lives. As Black women, we see Black feminism as the logical political movement to combat the manifold and simultaneous oppressions that all women of color face. Our politics initially sprang from the shared belief that Black women are inherently valuable, that our liberation is a necessity, not as an adjunct to somebody else's, but because we have an obvious need as human persons for autonomy. This may seem so obvious as to sound simplistic, but it is apparent that no other ostensibly progressive movement has ever considered our specific oppression, merely naming the pejorative stereotypes attributed to Black women: mammy, matriarch, sapphire, whore, a bulldagger, let alone cataloging the cruel, often murderous treatment we receive, indicates how little value has been placed upon our lives during 4 centuries of bondage in the Western Hemisphere. We realize that the only people who care enough about us to work consistently for our liberation are us. Our politics evolve from a healthy love for ourselves, our sisters, and our community, which allows us to continue our struggle and our work.
I have never apologized for the roles I play. Several times, I have persuaded the directors to omit dialect from modern pictures. They readily agreed to the suggestion. I've been told that I kept alive the stereotype of the Negro servant in the minds of theatergoers. I believe my critics think the public more naive than it actually is. As I pointed out to Freddie Washington, Arthur Treacher is indelibly stamped as a Hollywood butler, but I am sure no one would go to his home and expect him to meet them at the door with a napkin across his arm. George S. Schuyler, brilliant Negro columnist of the Pittsburgh Courier, had this to say about my role in Three's a Family. There is no more reason for assuming this maid to be typical of the Negro race than there is for assuming that the old, almost blind physician in the picture is characteristic of the medical profession when he tries to deliver the wrong woman of a baby. It seems to me to be good, rousing slapstick, at which Hollywood has traditionally excelled. No farce is factual, and no intelligent person expects it to be. If I speak from a personal angle, it is not because I am not aware of what Hollywood has done for others. In one picture, Imitation of Life, Louise Beavers became famous. Hollywood made practically unknown Lena Horne into an international singing star. It sent Eddie Rochester Anderson's stock skyrocketing. I have never gotten over my crush on Hollywood. At heart, I suppose I'm still a tourist from Milwaukee.
It is just incredible to hear those words spoken, performed by such a fierce performer. Well, Nicole Brewer, I have another question for you, but I'm going to hold it until later when we're all back. In the interim, I just want to take this moment to set up our next 2 guests. They are 2 of the actors involved in the project, Dawn Ursula and Shannon Dorsey. But before Dawn and Shannon join us, we're going to actually watch some excerpts from their work on Reset. So please enjoy an excerpt from the essay, The Uses of Anger by Audre Lorde, which was the second of the 2 pieces that I contributed to the project, being performed by Dawn Ursula, and an excerpt from the play, The Darker Face of the Earth, written by Rita Dove. which is being performed by Shannon Dorsey in the role of Phoebe. All right, let's play the videos.
My response to racism is anger. I've lived with that anger, ignoring it, feeding upon it, learning to use it before it laid my visions to waste for most of my life. Once I did it in silence, afraid of the weight. My fear of anger taught me nothing. Your fear of that anger will teach you nothing also. Women responding to racism means women responding to anger. The anger of exclusion, of unquestioned privilege, of racial distortions, of silence, ill use, stereotyping, defensiveness, misnaming, betrayal, and co-optation. My anger is a response to racist attitudes and to the actions and presumptions that arise out of those attitudes. If your dealings with other women reflect those attitudes, then my anger and your attendant fears are spotlights that can be used for growth. In the same way, I have used learning to express anger for my growth. But for corrective surgery, not guilt. Guilt and defensiveness are bricks in a wall against which we all flounder. They serve none of our futures. To the white women present who recognize these attitudes as familiar, but most of all, to all my sisters of color who live and survive thousands of such encounters, to my sisters of color who, like me, still tremble their rage under harness, or who sometimes question the expression of our rage as useless and disruptive, the two most popular accusations. I want to speak about anger, my anger, and what I have learned through my travels through its dominions. Everything can be used except what is wasteful. You will need to remember this when you are accused of destruction. Every woman has a well-stocked arsenal of anger, potentially useful against those oppressions, personal and institutional, which brought that anger into being. Focused with precision, it can become a powerful source of energy, serving progress and change. And when I speak of change, I do not mean a simple switch of positions or a temporary lessening of tensions, nor the ability to smile or feel good. I am speaking of a basic and radical alteration in those assumptions underlining our lives.
Mama worked in the kitchen until I was about 5. That's when the fever broke out in the quarters. She used to set table scraps out for the field hands, and I stuck wildflowers in the baskets to pretty them up. Mama said, "You never know what a flower could mean to somebody in misery." That fever tore through the cabins like wildfire. Master Jennings said field hands spread the contamination and forbid them to come up to the house. But Mama couldn't stand watching them just wasting away. So she started sneaking food to the quarters at night. Then the fever caught her too. She couldn't hide it long, and Master Jennings found out.
Wow, y'all. Reminder, this is just a teaser of what's on the site. So you have to go to woollyreset.net, watch the full videos. Please do it before the 31st. Please also join me in welcoming Shannon and Dawn, two incredible Woolly Company members. Hi, Shannon and Dawn.
Hey.
My first question for the two of you is there's a little feedback. Yeah, I hear a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure if it's me.
Uh-oh. I don't hear it.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm like, oh no, is it me? Because I don't hear it.
I'm worried it might be me. Oh, I guess I gotta go. No. Would you all actually just speak to the question of what a project like Reset means to you? And I'm gonna work on my sound issues.
Ooh, Shannon. Wow, Kristen works on her sound issues. That's a big question. That's a heavy question. What you think?
That's a big weighted one, right? So, what's the first word that pops into your head? Just like 3 words. 3 words.
Oh, that's good. That's good, Shannon. Okay.
One out the one, you do one, everyone, you do one.
That sounds great. Okay. Heavy.
Expansive.
Overwhelming.
Gut-wrenching.
Powerful.
Grace.
Affirming.
Ashe.
Yes. And then we can just start singing and dancing. Yes.
No, I'm back. Shannon, I think it might actually be your sound system. Do you mind muting for just 1 second? And we're gonna see if it goes away. I still hear it. So nope, it's not Shannon.
It's coming from my, oh wait, hey Dawn, they made feedback in your computer. Oh, there was a message, it went away. Uh-oh. I'm gonna try muting. Let's see if it's me.
Let's see if it's Dawn. Hey, Shannon.
Hey.
Can you hear? Oh yeah, I hear you perfectly. It's Dawn.
Oh.
Dawn, we'll send you some troubleshooting ideas. Shannon, you want to hang out with me for a little bit?
Sure.
And it'll just, the two of us can vibe. So yeah, do you want to speak to one of the things that you said? I just heard you say as like your one word was heavy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little bit more to that? Is it connected to, yeah, can you just speak a little bit more to that, where heaviness comes from?
Well, I think already just being a little technical, Phoebe's position, what she was talking about, where she was in, she's only like 19, and she already had the weight of the world on her every day.
Yeah.
That person is our great grandmother. That's heavy. Really heavy. And then you see how like that weight is still carried, whether it's metaphor, literal, and there has to be a more complex way of getting into how to break that up so we can have lighter loads in all forms. And how do you do that? You have to get started somewhere. So this was really cool to get started somewhere. You have to hit the reset button. And usually when you hit reset, you have to start from 1. The difference is that we're on a new system. This is a new operating system.
Yeah.
We can really make things soar if we dedicate ourselves to that work and that introspection. I hope I answered the question.
You answered the question beautifully. I think about sometimes what can feel like the weight of history, right? As well. And the way in which Rita Dove, who's the playwright for Darker Face of the Earth, who's also an incredible poet, she was poet laureate at least once, I believe. Go to her full bio, everyone out there. But the way in which she said, I will look at this, we know the history, but I'm going to build this play and make you see the humanity if you can't, is just like a really beautiful thing. And that connection, that personal connection you made with, in terms of thinking about like who is Phoebe in our own personal line, thinking about that as a curator on the project, and thinking about you all thinking about that as performers on the project. It's just it's really profound. And then there's like another layer too, which is also the importance of this work and actually what this play has meant to generations of Black theater artists and performers, and how this play is now part of like the DNA that we're passing down and part of that legacy. And I just think that's so stunning. So thank you for bringing all of that to the surface.
Thank
you. One of the things, Dawn, are you still working on your sound, or you think we can, we'll try it?
How we doing?
Oh, you sound awesome.
Sarah, marvelous Sarah, who's backstage behind all came up with trying to find. Yes. Oh,
wonderful.
Backstage.
Can I ask you a question about history? One of the things when you're thinking about, as an actor, as a performer, looking at language and historical figures and texts that are considered canonical, so to speak, particularly the challenge you had, perhaps challenge, also opportunity, with Audre Lorde, who is probably one of the more well-known figures in the Reset Project. How do you, does that bring a different kind of pressure to your artistic process? When people think they know how a thing should be or look or sound?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And when the work or the author is so well known that they've made the work itself, with the author has made such an impact on all of us, with an idea or a sound or a feeling to it. You want to honor that. But if you focus on trying to replicate it or duplicate it, then you will actually destroy the authenticity that everybody is hungering for you to bring to it when you're reenacting it, so to speak. And so then you're just working against the what we ultimately, all the experience that ultimately everybody wants to have. So yes, but then of course, because of the power of the work, the intention behind the work, and the person who's created it. I mean, that's a wonderful pressure. But you know, what a glorious opportunity to, in any way, shape, or form, embody something so profoundly created and bring it back up to the conscious of folks, people who may not have ever heard of it. You know, it's always a new generation that needs to experience all of this, as well as to, you know, a great reminder for people who do have a connection to it.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful lesson on the craft of acting.
Oh, thanks.
As Black performers in the DMV, what in your experiences, what stories do you feel like perhaps are missing from our stages? Does Reset create or signal in any way a way of thinking about other different kinds of projects and voices that you think perhaps we're missing right now?
You know, yes, I will. Since I've already started stuttering, I'll go ahead and
and then we'll come to you, Shannon, after.
You know, that question comes up in lots of different forms, and I'm going to come at it from a side angle, if I can, a little bit. Actually, to answer the question, yes, there are so many stories. Yes, there are so many stories. That's part of, I think, the recognition and fight that has been happening by Black women, by other people of color, other marginalized communities. And so when that question is posed to me, I can't help but juxtapose it against the kind of unspoken but understood idea of gatekeepers who are keeping those stories off of our stages. So as we're pounding on the door and creating wonderful projects and saying, let our stories in, we're not actually saying, well, why is that not happening? And that's for the listenership, the people who are viewing, who do not identify as one of these marginalized communities. And if I'm just going to go ahead and be direct, I'm talking to white people who have power and influence. I do not and refuse to come begging at your doorstep for you to allow this in. My question to you is, why don't you join us? Why don't you join us in demanding for these stories, asking for these stories, only offering your funding and money and support and seat on the board if only these stories are present, because these stories are always at the core a human story. You just need to go ahead and be okay with letting the storyteller be somebody else and allowing them to have the power and the funds and the ability to tell it their way. And time has shown you, look at the cultural landscape. You love this shit, pardon my French. You already do. So then let's just, you know, that. So I want to honor and answer the question, but because I always had this question come up in so many different conversations, I just want to say that's the context in which I
Absolutely. Well said. I know that that's very much a thing that I carry all the time. So even when it comes down to reading the plays, I can't get around not knowing what our voice could be without. So, since we are very much the fabric of this country, and also the fabric of the Western word and the fabric of the African world. And we're in this place smushed together. We have no choice but to like begin to peel back and at some point implode and go inward and kind of rip it to shreds so we can see who we are in our most authentic creative form.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, because I'm dealing with an illness, okay, yeah, I said that it's out there, woohoo, dealing with an illness. So one of the things that I used to do that was very therapeutic for me is paint. Paint, play the mbira, which I learned from this show. I did a woolly. I actually had to play that thing. Oh my gosh, I cried. I was so scared.
Brilliant. It was amazing.
You were fabulous. In the picture, you see the round thing. You can't see it's my thumbs doing it. Damn it, I did that shit. Anyway, but I still pluck at it like authentically because it gives me in the ugly, in the unknown, in the being unsure. I feel like there's something that's coming out that's me. And especially now that I had exposure to an African instrument, what happens? And that's the metaphor that makes me think of how can we start exploring the gamut of what our voice and what our work is supposed to look like. And that's the other thing, we need to get rid of a lot of those things. We're still operating under structures that are very white, that are very classist, that has a load of isms in the way that makes it harder, especially capitalism. Hello? Like, it makes it really hard to be this raw form, to see how messed up or ugly or imperfect it is, to create something gorgeous. So I think that having something like Reset is a great first step. It's a lovely, powerful first step in a direction of us knowing ourselves, because we're still in infancy when it comes to that. This country's very young, and our identity and what that is still very young. You know, we are very, very young type of people. So we need room to go ahead and be that toddler that gets to explore, you know, room, space, and get rid of judgment, because that shit gets in the way of it all. I know you recording. I'm sorry, I'm cussing. It's the best I can.
Well, I want to thank you all for just like being so honest and so real, right? Real talk. Like, this is healing and therapeutic for me. Because I remember once one of them, I was at a TCG conference, and it was a gathering of theater administrators of color. And one of the questions someone asked in the room was, I wonder oftentimes about who I would be, like who the person was that I could have been were it not for structural racism and all the other systems of oppression that, you know, we experience. And this thinking about like getting to that person, like having the freedom to, and I don't know if we'll ever actually get to that version of Kristen out there, for example. But just thinking about that and thinking about like there are some things that are inherently you, and then there are some things that are imposed on you by others, by systems and by structures, is part of what comes up for me in the conversation that we're having.
And I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
It'll be quick. I do want to add that I do have ideas as to what I want to see. I also had this artistic space where I'm afraid of saying too much because I would like to do it. I kind of want to be the person that comes out with it, but I got too much going on. And what I want to see, and I would love to perform in it, it's like, I would like for us to get to the point where we start examining this thing that's happening within the diaspora, I would like to see that intimate thing that happens in between two people that are like a Black American person is someone that's from the Caribbean or someone that's from West Africa or East Africa, and get deep into what the family structures and the social ideas of what the other is. I know growing up, I saw East Africans and West Africans and a lot of Black, well, DC is Chocolate City. Everybody was Black, but there were a lot of people that weren't Black American. And I learned so much. Like, you know, at school, someone might call somebody an African booty scratcher, which don't say that, y'all. Especially if you white skin, don't say that at all, ever. But like, that's a really hurtful term. At the same time, if I go home with my Nigerian friend, I learned that her parents may not look at other Black Americans as equals. You know, they might look at us like you know, that Black Americans ain't really anything either. That's not we're not a monolith, but I'm curious to see a story about that. But we have so much on us with whiteness. It's hard for us to get into these deeper interpersonal things in this deep way. And we're still young in who we are. And it's like we're supposed to know everything about ourselves, and we've been here for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shut up now.
No.
Please.
You speaketh the truth. I also want to be sure to invite Nicole Brewer back, because Nicole, I would like you back here with us in the Zoom space, and want to make space for you if you have any thoughts about any of the conversation that we've been having, or if it's brought up anything for you as well. Just thinking about all of the things we're ruminating on and the truths.
Yeah, no, I've been enjoying listening, like deeply listening to what you all are talking about and what you're offering into the space. And then dreaming as I'm listening, right, to these things that you all are shaking loose inside of me and where I find myself in it. So I don't have anything to add but gratitude. I'm grateful.
Well, I have a question I would like to ask of all of us. So many choices. What do you hope young artists, maybe some of our young Howard students out there, or not so young Howard students out there, take away from Reset? Is there anything that you might want to charge them with? And it could be Reset directly or indirectly. Yes, Shannon, what do you think?
Yes, study it all, right? All of the greats. Now I think Duran, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Duran, even better. That he's a part of African American Studies at Howard, and I got really excited. I did African American Studies at Temple University, and I know one of the principles that kept popping up that I think we're all familiar with is SanCOFA and what that means, right? I like to look at it as we study ourselves. We also should study other cultures. We should figure out what it all is. And that's very important to theater as well, because when we get deep into theater, it's very European. And Europe, in the evolution of the world, hasn't been around very long. There was something before that. There was a lot before that. It was expansive, it was big, and it was large. What does that look like? How can you go into that and still know the canon of all the greats? We know Shakespeare. Do I need to say anything else when it comes to that? We know these Western things. Oh, what is SanCOFA? SanCOFA principle, for a short version, like my mama would say, go back and get it. The other people would say, like, to go back and retrieve what was lost or unknown so you can move forward. It's it's also an Adinkra symbol. It's from Ghana. It's Ghanaian. I hope that was right. I'll research it later and email you. But forgive me, ancestors. with that principle, keep in mind, you do need to go ahead and know all of this white work. Go ahead and learn it and then dismantle it. Graduate, get your degree, but while you're there, see if you can study other things. Be well versed in it. So when you come across something else brilliant, you know what you're seeing and you have something that challenges it. And now you have a different frame of fucking thought. Doesn't have to be this white structure at all times with everything you do, everywhere you're going, everything you understand in order to exist and survive, exist in that box. What does that look like outside of that? We tell stories, right? We tell stories about the human experience, right? So I think the least that we can do, go ahead and study that. Don't forget that over there, and then destroy it all and see what it's like for you. Boom. Period.
Nicole, did I see a hand, or was that a small boom?
Exactly. I had to add to that. Boom.
Somebody just said something about Shakespeare, and I would like to clarify. Is that unless someone else wants to?
So the question in the chat, I think that you're talking about, Shannon, why dismantle? Why not build upon it? Shakespeare told stories about the human experience and add more.
Because how do you get to know what your voice is? How do you get to create authentically from your own space if you don't take a chance? No one's saying that you don't have to build. No one is saying that you can't do that. What I'm challenging you, because the question is, what's the challenge? And I'm challenging you to do something different from what we know. But you still study it. You still value the work. It doesn't knock down what that work is. But you have to have, at some point, if you want to start telling stories that go beyond what we know, you have to do something different. I think that's what I'm saying. And I hope I'm being emphatic, but I'm more affable than what I've seen right now. So if you got any other questions, feel free.
No, I think that's right. And I want to lift up too what Jennifer Bowman said also in the chat, that Shakespeare told stories about a human experience. So again, like allowing Shakespeare to be one of the roots, one of the branches of the tree, but also acknowledging that the human experience is just so many more. And sometimes I think particularly when I know myself, speaking from my eye place, when you're thirsting for stories and for representation and to know, more about who you are and where you're coming from, it's very easy. It's very easy because an artist is acclaimed to say, well, like, this is the way, this is the pathway to finding myself. Through a twist on Shakespeare, I will emerge because I am dark-haired and I can play Hermia, and now I have found myself through that experience. But gosh, I would much rather play Phoebe in Darker Face of the Earth.
Like, no one's blaspheming Shakespeare. I love Shakespeare, but there's more than just Shakespeare out there. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So other folks want to wrestle with any so we were talking about advice charges for young actors, our young performers out there. I think there is something to this conversation about curation that I want to lift up, because so much of having curatorial power in the hands of these, 6 women, and the conversation about gatekeeping that we've had. I just really want to lift up that sharing power is something that does not necessarily come easily to folks who are accustomed to having it and to holding it. And so oftentimes, I know in my experience, there could be inclusion, right? But inclusion doesn't imply any shared power, and the power for decision making. And so I think, Nicole, I'm thinking about you and all of the work that you have been doing across the country, talking about, anti-racist theater, and I'm sure you probably have thoughts about sharing power and inclusion versus, actual anti-oppression and anti-racism work. But yes, I think about yes, for me, I guess the part of the charge would be to not just think of oneself as a performer, but also as the multi-hyphenate human beings that we all are, and how curation is a part of that, and how producing can look like a part of that, and writing, and just being a creative force. Dawn or Nicole, do either one of you want to add, or?
Nicole, you're referring to me. Well, I would just co-sign and agree and support what you just said, Kristen, and what I'm also hearing, and what I often advise or offer to young people in conversation is to create your own, and to find your own networks and create your own networks now while you're in school, your support networks, but not only your support networks with each other, financially, because when we're talking about power, and again, when I hear that about talking about power, is who are we asking the power to be shared with? Who's got a hold of the power, and why aren't they sharing it, and why are we asking them to? And can we have that? I mean, there are times when that is absolutely something that we're going to have to negotiate, and we find ourselves in those situations. But can we also intentionally look for creating our own power structures? In which we don't have to negotiate. And that means we look intentionally for creating and speaking to our own communities. We find our own support systems with who wants our art. I mean, right now, with being in this pandemic, a lot of artists are having these real existential conversations with themselves, which is, who am I as an artist? Who am I actually doing the art for? Why am I doing the art? What does it actually mean to me? And what have I been doing before, kind of because I've had to? But now that I realize I don't have to, I'm actually surviving. Some of us are, a lot of us aren't. God, blessings unto those who are truly struggling in another way. But those of us who are in such a blessed is the right word I want to use, a fortunate place to be able to just be worried about this part, okay? Not about, staying under a roof or staying alive, but right, we're talking about the art and how to create it. Thankfully we are. But yes, let us intentionally not be in need to have that fight. So make your own, and then define for you what success means, right? And try not to compromise. I had a Black artistic director constantly say to me, and I've known him for many, many years, Dawn, you don't have to say yes. You don't have to compromise. You do. And when you do, why? Okay. But for those of us who are my age, there's always work at the post office, is what is on the other end of that idea. You remember that? Remember that? Some of y'all too young to remember that movie. I'll try to remember and tell you later. But the choice is you can always say no. There might be a loss to it, but you can always say no. And in saying no, right, is the opportunity for you to make it yourself. So that's my advice to the young people. Make it yourself.
I can't take notes fast enough, first of all. I'm over here trying to write this wisdom down as it is coming from all of you. I think in terms of my additional offer of support, amplify, things to be thinking about, I think there's real power in having an awareness or acknowledgement that our industry is not like bruised and needs a Band-Aid. There has been a complete and total breakdown of our industry, and there's such power in naming that. And the power lies in how we dream or manifest it as it is built, designed as we go along, right? And I think for people who are students right now, that's what generation has had that? I mean, like seriously. And I say that with all respect of having to mourn, really having to mourn what you thought you were going to get and how you were going to get there and what you were going to do. And so having that grief, having that mourning period, but also then dusting yourselves off, pulling out, you know, all of the dreams and possibilities and doing it in community around how do I want to collaborate, period. I don't even think it's necessarily about the projects. How do I want to collaborate? And what is it costing me to do whatever the collaboration is? And understanding that cost is not just a financial cost, my ability to pay my mortgage or my rent or whatever. It is a spiritual cost and it is an emotional cost in working with people and trying. You won't always get a collective of folks that are tithing into you, but trying desperately to skew the numbers. So 80% of your collaborators are people who are helping to create healthy communities, who are nourishing to you artistically as a person, and will help and support you. Shannon, you bringing up SanCOFA is so powerful. I think it is important for me to name, I feel my personal politic is a lot of the place that I find myself in our industry right now is unearned credit. And I just mean in terms of the way in which capitalism and the way of shiny object and the way of the commodification of self wants to say Nicole Brewer is expert or in doing this thing, and it isn't true. And so I acknowledge that that is not true, but I also take that power and utilize it to make sure that the people who made sure I had work, come on, Eric Ruffin, I am here to honor you. Thank you so much, had work. Come on, Dawn Ursula, when I had a child in the industry that told me you weren't allowed to have kids and continue to work, who took my phone call and talked me through how to be a mother in this field, I will never forget. And so it is so important for me. I ain't trying to make it without the rest of our community. And so I offer that back to our young people as well. If you make it to some place and you look to your left, right, up, down, and those people who were there with you when nobody was taking your calls wouldn't offer you anything, aren't there, I would say you've done some missteps. And so just take your time. It'll take us longer to get there, but when we arrive, it'll be us together. So putting that into space.
I just want to take a second to breathe. Yes. So I have some questions that our audience, our the other part of this conversation, sent to us in advance. And I want to try to honor as many of those questions as I can. And also want to name that we will probably not get to all of them. But thank you for being generous and wanting to and really wanting to be in dialogue. So the first question, which is from a student, what do you think is the path to creating three-dimensional and accurate content for Black people on American stage and screen?
I think it's kind of connecting to some of the idea of creating, recreating. I don't know that answer anymore. I think that a lot of things that I felt was forward thinking that I always wanted to do, like, like Black Panther. I still want to do Black Panther, actually. Or like anime. I want to see more Black anime. Well, now I know we're talking about a different medium, but my point is like, I don't know what the next thing is, but I'm ready to rock and roll with what that is. But I know that if we keep doing the same things the same way, anybody heard I don't know all of the nuance of it. I haven't researched it deeply, but there's a saying that if you keep repeating the same thing over and over again, then it's insanity and nothing will change.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, we have to do something change. And I think not knowing is a good place. And we have a lot to look at and a lot to absorb and a lot to sit with and just see what happens from it. I think also, like, when you're younger, because a lot of what I'm saying is geared to Howard, by the way. So that's why I'm speaking a certain way. I'm thinking, when you are in school and you're studying, you are told that you have to do things right. You have to do things a certain way. You have to learn it a certain way. You have to understand what it is. And if you don't understand it in the right way, then you fail. And that's a waste of money, a waste of time. There's other complications. So the type of pressure that you all have is palpable, is thick. So you want to get it right. And I get the question. I get it. But I'm also saying that going to Nicole, what Nicole was saying and what Don was touching on, and all in all, this is the time. We have the space. You all have the space. You all have the minds and the opportunity to bring forth something that we've never seen before. I have ideas, like, I want to see some virtual reality in the actual theater. That's still a little progressive, a little bit. Somebody can take that and go 1,000, like, go further, and don't be afraid that you're doing something that's wrong. You have to, like, be okay with being messy and ugly and incorrect so you can get to the right of it. And when you get to the right of it, then you can elevate it to whatever you want it to be. We trust you. We trust you. We trust your voice. We trust your vision. We trust your guidance. We have to be SanCOFA as well. We have to, when you're young, you go back and you respect the past, but you have to move forward, and y'all are forward, So thank you for the respect. Thank you for doing your part. Now go forward.
Lightning round. Question from the audience. Given the opportunity, what do you think Reset 2.0 might look like? How would you expand the storytelling?
And I can jump in here really quick because as curators, we had already imagined Reset 2.0. And in the imagining of it, it did not include us. And so we were very intentional about naming our specific lens and focus and like where we entered the work. And the hope was that this would not be seen as an omission, but rather an invitation for people to add their distinctive lived experience and stories and beloved communities to the next visioning of Reset. So wanting to put that in there, I don't know what 2.0 will look like, because to Shannon's point, it's about the people who then take that idea and build on it, and it will be whatever they offer it up to be.
I do want to jump in and just say that the curation of it being the constellation is something that struck me so powerfully, in that it is expansive, in that there is no end to it, and that there is always room for discovery, and that it is past coming to the future and you see it light years later. So there's so much, especially as speaking as Black women, there is so much yet to be SanCOFA, yet to be unearthed, yet to be found. Our stories have been buried, and for them, and not only the stories, but our people, our the history. And when we talk about the history, there are so many moments of any given person's life that is history that the whole world should know of, but the reporter doesn't come and knock on your door and ask you for an interview and write it up and disseminate it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have as much power or impact or importance as any other headline that makes it across the world. And so when I look back, I go, the millions of, like the constellations, the millions of people and names that could be there. And because some of that might not be able to be found, I give us permission to create it. To find an old Black and white photograph of someone and mama, who is this? I have no idea. I don't even know why I have that anymore. Well, I'm gonna make the history and the story of that person and imagine and put it to the future. I'm gonna stop now. But I would love to see Reset 2.0, 10.5, 11.50, whatever it is, because it is endless. And this world has a lot of catching up to do to give us the levels.
I also think, thank you, Dawn and Nicole. It also makes me think about too, like, how can Reset 2.0, again, thinking about power and sharing power and decentralizing. In what ways can Reset become even more contributive and collaborative? And what would it look like to be able to kind of like build upon itself? These were some of the early conversations that the curatorial team was having. And I think, again, as we, really resonating with me, the idea that not waiting for the power, but actually creating your own power. I think it also reminds me what they say about energy, right? That it can neither be created nor just, okay, I'll figure that part out. I'll figure out the physics later. But but yeah, I mean, I love the idea of a sprawl, like letting the Reset universe truly just sprawl and grow and have tentacles and roots and branches and all of that, because how can we even represent the multiplicity of who we are? And I think that's one of the beautiful things perhaps about like the form and the way the form speaks to the content. I don't know that Reset could live on a stage. I think there is something about it living in the digital world that actually feels so apropos. And again, like to what has been being said about how do we redefine and reimagine the form, like not just in terms of, oh, you know, this feels convenient for the time, but also like these are the possibilities actually embedded in this kind of multimedia digital collaboration and world. Anyway. We have only a couple of minutes left. So I will address one of the questions, which was, why can't we make this content evergreen, from the general audience? And I think, you know, speaking for the curators, our original hope was that we could. And I fingers are still crossed. Maybe there will be a way. But until then, tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your families, share it. Let's create a demand for it in the next few, week or so that it's available. But we hope to be able to, extend it if it's possible. Yes, follow the link in the chat. Shannon Dorsey, Dawn Ursula, Nicole Brewer, you are such generous, soulful people. Thank you for bringing so much truth and honesty, and just, I'm in awe. And you're some of my favorite people. So I was like, yeah, this is the best ever. But I didn't even know how much I needed this time to be in sisterhood with all of you. So thank you for sharing. Eric, Ruffin, where are you? We're turning it over to you to close us out.
Here, I am here. Hello, everyone. Oh, there are so many moments during this conversation where I was just full. I cannot thank you enough for sharing your wisdom. You know, I think we eat, sleep, drink, eliminate, procreate, but what we do most importantly is share information and experience with each other so that we can grow and thrive and build. And you gave us some building blocks tonight. I'm so grateful, so grateful. I'm Eric Ruffin, Artistic Director of the Howard University Department of Theater Arts. I am who I am because of you on a cellular level. I just want to give some thank yous. Thank you to everyone that has joined us tonight. If you like this provocative conversation, please check out the other Spotlight series videos. They're on the HU Theater Arts YouTube channel. I want to sincerely thank Woolly Mammoth for this partnership. Kristen, Allison, Duran, Lolly, Ricky, rock stars, love you long time. And I also want to give a thank you to the Friends of Theater and Dance, who have made so much of this possible. Good night and have a wonderful evening.